A man with burn scars across the left side of his face was told, in the hallway of a hospital, that the woman who claimed to love him couldn't be seen with him anymore. She said it in a voice meant for boardrooms, controlled, decisive, final. And a night shift nurse who overheard it through a 2-inch gap in the door did something that no one on that floor expected, least of all him. But before any of that, you need to know who Abby Sinclair was. She was 29 years old, worked the overnight shift in the burn unit at Memorial Grace Hospital in Portland, Oregon, and had a habit her grandmother had given her that most people, when they heard about it, called strange. Every single shift, no exceptions, including holidays, including the nights that left her so hollowed out she could barely drive home. She wrote one thing in a small leather journal she kept tucked in the front pocket of her scrubs. Not a medical note, a moment. Something true she'd witnessed that proved the world was still worth the trouble. Her grandmother, Nana Bea, had pressed the first journal into her hands the day Abby started nursing school. "You're going to see a lot of suffering," Nana Bea had said, holding both of Abby's hands in both of hers. "You need to write down the other thing, too. Otherwise, you'll forget there is another thing." Abby was on her 5th journal now. She grew up in Medford with Nana Bea and her younger sister Josie. Their parents hadn't left dramatically. There was no single terrible night, no screaming, no slammed doors. They'd just gradually been somewhere else more and more often, until Nana Bea sat both girls down one Sunday morning and said, with the calm of someone who had made peace with a hard fact, that some people weren't built to stay, and that the ones who were built to stay were more than enough. Josie was 25 now and used a wheelchair. A car accident at 17 had seen to that. She had a degree in graphic design from Portland State and the kind of talent that stopped people mid-sentence when they saw her work. She sent out applications constantly. Abby never asked how many came back with a response, because she already knew the number was wrong and that knowing it out loud made something in her chest do a complicated, furious thing. Rhett Camden was 41, the founder and CEO of Crestline Systems, a logistics technology company worth somewhere between $90 and $120 million, depending on who you asked and when. 6 weeks before that Tuesday night, he had been touring a manufacturing facility when a fire broke out. The burn unit at Memorial Grace had received him with 2nd and 3rd degree burns across the left side of his face, his neck, and his left shoulder. The surgeons had been thorough and honest. The recovery would be long. Some of this would be permanent. He'd been assigned to room 412. Abby had been assigned to room 412. That was the beginning of things, though neither of them would have described it that way at the time. On that Tuesday, the one that changed everything, Abby was coming around the corner with a chart when she heard the voice in the hallway, sharp, rehearsed. The particular tone of someone who has decided what they're going to say and is now simply managing the delivery. "I can't do this, Rhett. I need you to understand that." Abby stopped. The door to 412 was cracked open 2 inches. "I'm not asking you to stay forever," the man's voice answered. "Quieter, rougher. I'm asking you to stay today. I've been here every day for 2 weeks. Whitney." "No, listen to me." The sound of heels on linoleum, 1 step 2. "I agreed to be with Rhett Camden, the executive. The man who walked into a room and owned it, that's who I was with." A pause with real weight in it. "The man in that bed, I don't know him, and I'm not going to pretend I do." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Abby had heard in 4 years of overnight shifts. She pushed the door open and walked in. Whitney Ashford, 36, corporate attorney, ash blonde, dressed like she had somewhere better to be, was standing near the door with her handbag already on her arm. Rhett was in the bed looking at the far wall. Not the window, the bare wall, the part with nothing on it. "I'll give you 2 a moment," Abby said in the tone she used for situations that were quietly coming apart. "That's not necessary," Whitney said. "I was leaving." She left. Her heels made a sound going down the hall that was not loud but was very deliberate. The sound of someone choosing not to look back. Abby set her chart on the counter. She checked the IV line. She checked the dressing schedule on the board. She did all of it slowly and without commentary, giving Rhett the specific kind of space that isn't absence. It's presence with no demands attached. He said nothing for a full minute. "Then you heard that?" "Some of it," Abby said. "Which part?" She turned around, enough to know it wasn't fair. Rhett looked at her. The scarring on the left side of his face had changed how his expression moved. The left corner of his mouth didn't work the same way the right one did. But his eyes were entirely intact, and they were the kind of eyes that were in the habit of reading things accurately. He read her now. I don't need sympathy, he said. I know, she said. That's not what I'm offering. She pulled the chair from the corner, the one she'd quietly moved closer to his bed on her second shift with him, because she'd noticed he had no visitors yet, and sat down, not the way a nurse sits, across from him like a person with nowhere else to be. I have a thing I do, she said. It's a little strange. What is it? She pulled the journal from her pocket. The current one, the 5th, worn at the spine, the elastic band starting to fray. Every shift I write down one thing I see that holds up. Proves something decent is still happening. She looked at it, then back at him. Tonight I watched a man absorb something genuinely terrible and not disappear into it. He said nothing for a moment, then that's a low bar. Most of the best things start there. Something shifted in his face, not a smile, but the quality of the air in the room changed. In the weeks that followed, Abby discovered that Rhett Camden was almost nothing like the magazine profiles had suggested. The profiles said, aggressive, relentless, self-made, competitive. What they didn't say was that he knew the full name of every person on the maintenance staff at Crestline, that he had read every book on the hospital library cart, including the ones that didn't interest him because his hands needed something to do that didn't involve mirrors, that he'd been genuinely funny before the fire, dry and quick in the way that ambushes you, and was still funny now but had simply forgotten he was allowed to be. Abby reminded him. Not intentionally. She just said whatever she was actually thinking, about the vending machine coffee on the 3rd floor being almost hostile in its badness, about the night orderly who hummed the wrong lyrics to every song but never stopped humming, about the small cactus that had appeared outside the nurse's station with no explanation and that no one had claimed. He started laughing at these things, real laughs, the kind that are surprised out of a person. 3 weeks after Whitney left, Abby stopped by 412 at the end of her shift to say goodbye, which had become a habit neither of them had formally acknowledged. He was sitting up, new this week, looking at his phone with the expression of a man reviewing a document that had personally offended him. My VP sent me 40 slides, he said. What time is it? 6:14. 40 slides at 6 in the morning is something that should be illegal. Agreed. He set the phone down. Is it strange to say I'm grateful for a reason not to look at it? She sat in the chair. She was still in scrubs, bag not yet on her shoulder. You don't want to go back, she said. I don't know what I want. A pause. That's the first honest thing I've said in about a month. She opened the journal. She didn't usually offer to read from it. She never had before. Can I read you something? He said yes. She found the page. 11 weeks ago. Room 412, new patient. Wouldn't make eye contact, which people mistake for shame but is usually something else entirely. Emergency contact on the intake form was his assistant. That one stayed with me all night. Rhett was quiet. An emergency contact being your assistant, she said, closing the journal, is a specific kind of lonely. I was about to say something defensive, he said, but it's accurate. You have better options now. She said it lightly. She meant it seriously. He heard both things at once. 2 weeks later, on her day off, Rhett called her at 2 in the afternoon. This is the worst Tuesday I've had in 6 weeks, he said. That's a very specific measurement. The physical therapist is extremely cheerful. I don't have the energy for cheerful right now. What kind of energy do you have? A pause, the kind that wants to hear about the cactus. She laughed, which surprised her. You want me to talk about a cactus? I want you to talk, he said, about whatever you're actually thinking. So she did. She told him about Nana Bea, who had been calling twice a day since Abby mentioned she'd met someone interesting and was now treating every call like a deposition. She told him about Josie, who had designed a logo for a small East Side bakery on a freelance basis, and it was genuinely stunning. And the bakery had offered her an insulting flat fee, and the explanation that the exposure was really the value. And Josie had reported this back in her driest possible voice, and Abby had needed to leave the room so Josie wouldn't see her expression. Rhett laughed at all of it, specifically, not out of politeness. Dinner, he said, when I'm out of here. You're still on pain management and can't lift your left arm above the shoulder. When I'm out of here, Abby. She looked out the window. Josie was in the kitchen, not listening very loudly. Okay, she said, dinner. He was discharged on a Friday in March. The scarring was, in the surgical team's words, stable. It would not worsen, and it would not resolve. He'd had one graft on his shoulder. More reconstructive options were available. He was in no hurry to pursue them, and his surgeons had stopped bringing it up. On Saturday, he took her to a restaurant she'd never been to and probably couldn't have afforded on her own, which was less an act of showing off than a genuine oversight she found more endearing than anything else. He wore a good shirt, and he did not sit with his left side toward the wall. She noticed this and wrote it down later. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about building Crestline from one warehouse in 2011 with 12 employees and a second-hand fleet management system he'd partially written himself. She told him about nursing school, about 2 years in the ER before the burn unit, about the specific skill of learning to speak to people at the worst moments of their lives without flinching or performing calm. Actually being calm, because there was a difference, and patients always knew which one they were getting. The worst part of the fire, he said at some point over coffee, wasn't the pain. It was the first time someone looked at me afterward and looked away. Not out of cruelty, just reflex, that split second. I know, she said. You never did that. I knew what I was looking at, she said. A person deciding whether to stay present or check out entirely. She set down her cup. I was hoping you'd stay. He looked at her for a long moment. I'd like to keep seeing you, he said, and it came out slightly formal, like someone reading from a draft they'd revised too many times. Abby smiled. I know. Is that a yes? It's a yes, Rhett. The next 3 months were simply the best 3 months she'd had in recent memory. Tuesday dinners, Saturday mornings with coffee they made badly on purpose as a running joke that had outlasted the original reason for it. Long phone calls that began about logistics and drifted somewhere else. He met Nana Bia over video call and spent 40 minutes listening to her explain a documentary about hummingbird migration because he asked one question and actually meant it. Nana Bia called Abby afterward and said, in a tone that permitted no counter-argument, "That man is a keeper." Josie met him in person and said nothing for 6 days. Then she texted, "He asked to see my portfolio. Not to be polite, he actually looked at it. I could tell the difference." It was the best review he could have received. But not everything adjusted so cleanly. Rhett's mother, Dorothea Camden, 67 precise, accustomed to managing the Camden family's public face with the calm authority of someone who has never lost control of a situation, called one Sunday afternoon while Abby was in Rhett's kitchen making tea. He answered on speaker without thinking. "I need you to be honest with me," Dorothea said. "This woman. Her name is Abby. I understand her name. I'm asking about the situation." "There's no situation, we're together." A silence of the kind Dorothea Camden used to suggest a preferred alternative existed. "She's a nurse, at the hospital where you were a patient." "Yes, both of those things." Rhett, her voice shifted, not unkind, just cleared of softness. "I know this past year has been extremely difficult, and I know that when we're at our lowest, we reach for whoever is there. Sometimes that person is genuinely wonderful, and sometimes what? Sometimes the vulnerability is what they're drawn to, not the person underneath it." Abby set the mug down very carefully so it didn't make a sound. Rhett said quietly, "She's going to be in my life, Mom. That's not a request." Later after the call, he found Abby at the kitchen window with her hands in her pockets. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be," she said. "She loves you and she's scared. That's what scared love does." She turned around. "I'd like to meet her, on my terms, not on the defensive." He studied her. "You want to walk straight into that?" "I've worked 12-hour overnight shifts in a burn unit for 4 years," she said. "I think I can handle Sunday lunch." She was right, mostly. Dorothea's house was the kind of house that made you feel your shoes were wrong the moment you stepped inside. Beautiful and immaculate and cold in the particular way. Expensive houses are sometimes cold, as though comfort were something that happened in other people's homes. Rhett's older brother, Arden Camden, 44, the comfortable version of Rhett, wine already in hand at 11:30 in the morning, was there too, which Rhett had not warned her about. "So," Arden said, looking Abby over in a way he made no effort to disguise, "the night nurse." "The nurse," Abby said pleasantly. "The shift varies." Arden spent the first hour finding small places to insert the word convenient into the conversation. How convenient that she worked that specific unit. How convenient that she'd had that level of access. He used it 5 times, Abby counted. Dorothea, at least, was direct. Over lunch, she set down her fork and said, "Tell me about your family." So Abby told her. About Nana Bea and about Josie, and how Josie's logo for an East Side bakery was now on 3 billboards in Portland and had led to the bakery offering her a full staff position, and how Nana Bea had taught both of them that the most valuable thing you could give another person wasn't your time or your resources but your actual attention, which was a different thing, and most people couldn't tell the difference, but the person on the receiving end always could. Dorothea listened the way people listen when they're deciding whether something is worth their time. Then she asked, "Why nursing?" Abby felt the question land somewhere specific inside her. "That's a long answer," she said. "I have the afternoon." She looked at Rhett. He gave her nothing, not encouragement, not caution, just presence. It was exactly the right thing. She told the truth. 7 years ago, she had been a second-year medical resident at Providence St. Vincent in Portland. She'd been good. She knew this not from arrogance but from records, the same way she kept her journals. Then she'd filed a formal complaint against a senior attending physician named Dr. Vincent Hale, who had twice falsified post-operative documentation to conceal complications in 2 patients. Both patients had eventually recovered, but one had required an additional surgery that proper documentation could have prevented. The hospital had investigated. Dr. Hale had denied it. The reviewing board was, as she had put it to herself many times since, complicated. She had been advised by 2 people she respected to retract the complaint and move on. She had not retracted it. 6 weeks later, her residency contract was not renewed. Restructuring, the letter said. She applied to other programs. Each time, the reference check went somewhere specific, and each time, what came back described a resident who was difficult, who had challenged authority, who had been involved in a professional dispute. She had never been able to prove the references were coordinated. She had never been entirely convinced they weren't. She became a nurse. She was a very good nurse. She had never stopped being good. The dining room was completely quiet when she finished. Arden did not use the word convenient again. Dorothea said, "And the physician?" "He retired last year," Abby said, with a commendation. Something moved through Dorothea Camden's face. It was not a comfortable thing to sit across from. Abby wrote in the journal that night, told the whole story out loud to people I barely know, still here. 2 weeks later, Rhett called her from his office at 6 in the evening, and she could hear from the first word that something had shifted. "There's an acquisition offer," he said. "Meridian Capital, $95 million. My board is interested." She waited. She could feel what was underneath the sentence. "There's a condition," she said. "There's a condition," he confirmed. She sat down. "Tell me." His voice was even, the particular evenness of someone who has already decided and is now simply relaying information. "The lead partner at Meridian believes that my personal circumstances signal instability. The scarring, the recovery timeline, and, a brief pause, the relationship with someone he described as a hospital employee." Abby was quiet. "He communicated through my VP that the deal moves forward with certain changes to my personal life," Rhett said. "Specifically that I end this." The silence stretched. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said no." "Rhett." "I said no, Abby. This is not a conversation. It's information I'm giving you. It's $95 million. I know what it is. You have a board, you have employees. And I have a life," he said, quiet but firm in a way that didn't leave room for negotiation, "which I am not handing over to a man who thinks he can purchase my personal decisions along with my company." A pause. He looked at my face in that meeting. I could see exactly what he concluded, that I should be grateful anyone was making an offer, that I would accept whatever terms he set. Another pause. "I've had enough of people deciding who I am before they've spent 5 minutes in the same room with me." Abby felt something release in her chest that she hadn't known was held tight. "You're going to find another investor," she said. "I know. And when you do, that partner at Meridian is going to watch it happen." A small pause, Rhett said. "He is." Dorothea Camden called Abby directly on a Thursday morning, not Rhett, Abby. "I spoke with a colleague on the review board at Providence," Dorothea said without preamble. "I want to be careful not to overstate what I was able to do, but Dr. Hale's commendation has been formally reviewed and rescinded. Your original complaint is now entered into the permanent record as substantiated." Abby sat down on the kitchen floor. Her legs made the decision before she did. "I also spoke with the dean of the residency program," Dorothea continued. "You're 7 years out. I understand if returning isn't what you want anymore, but the pathway is open if you ever choose to open the door." "Why?" Abby said. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Dorothea was quiet for a moment. "Because you told me the truth at my table without softening it for my benefit. And because what was done to you was a specific kind of wrong that I had the ability to address." A pause. "And because my son looks at you the way his father used to look at me. I should have been able to see what that meant without making you earn it first." Her voice was steady but not entirely easy. "I owe you an apology for how I treated you when you came to the house. I was protecting something that didn't require protection." It wasn't a dramatic statement, it was just true, which, Abby had learned from years of overnight shifts, was sometimes all a thing needed to be. "Thank you," Abby said. "That means a great deal." "Come to dinner soon," Dorothea said. "Bring your grandmother. Rhett tells me she watches the same nature programs I do." Abby laughed, wet, and she does. The proposal was not complicated. They were in his apartment on an ordinary evening, watching something on television neither of them was paying attention to. The journal was on the coffee table. She'd taken it out earlier to show him something Nana Bea had written inside the front cover years ago, pressed between the pages like a letter. "The kindest thing you can do for a person is to arrive and mean it." Rhett picked up the journal. He turned it over in his hands, the way he sometimes did with things he was thinking carefully about. Then he set it down and looked at her. "I want you to mean it permanently," he said. She looked at him. "I'm not good at the prepared version of this," he said. "But I know what I want, and I know why, and I know the reasons aren't going to change." He reached into his pocket, small box, no ceremony, no rehearsed speech. "I want to build things with you, not just the company, actual things. A life that looks like what's in that journal, all the small, true things." He opened the box. "Marry me, Abby." She looked at the ring. She looked at him. At the left side of his face, at the scar she knew by now, the way you know something you've stopped needing to study because it's simply part of the world you live in. "Yes," she said, "obviously yes." He laughed. She laughed. He put the ring on her finger and she said it was beautiful and then said she genuinely didn't care what it looked like, for the record, and he said he knew, which was why he'd picked it carefully, and that was the entire thing, start to finish, which was exactly right. "She wrote that night?" he asked. I said yes, Nana Bea is going to lose her mind. Nana Bea lost her mind. The wedding was in June, at a small vineyard outside Portland. Rhett had chosen it specifically because the paths through the property were wide and flat and navigable, and because Josie had looked at photographs of the place and said the late afternoon light through the vine rows was going to be extraordinary, and Josie was never wrong about light. Arden gave a toast. He had undergone, over the preceding months, what Abby privately described to Josie as a slow-moving renovation of his better instincts. The toast ended with, "My brother chose someone I wouldn't have chosen for him. I'm glad he didn't ask." It was the best he had available, and it was enough. Dorothea danced with Nana Bea to a song neither of them explained. No one could account for how it started, it simply happened. Rhett did not spend the reception managing his angles. He stood in the middle of it, beside Abby, talking to everyone who came to them, laughing at things that were actually funny, present in the way a person is present when they have stopped trying to manage what other people see. He was exactly the man she had watched in room 412 on the worst night of his year, still deciding to stay. Except now he wasn't deciding anymore. It was simply what he did. It was simply who he was. She wrote the morning after. He walked into every room last night like he owned the light in it. He did. 14 months later, Josie was running a supported employment initiative that had placed over 200 people with disabilities into professional roles across 6 Portland-area companies. Crestline had seeded the program, and 3 other major employers had joined in the first 8 months. The model was being studied by organizations in 3 other states. Dr. Hale's commendation remained rescinded. The formal record stood. Abby had chosen, for now, to stay in the work she already did well. She had accepted the Director of People and Culture role at Crestline and was rebuilding the company's hiring and retention practices from the ground up. And it turned out that 4 years of reading people at their lowest had made her extraordinarily good at building systems that treated people like people. The cactus Stewart was still alive on the windowsill of her office. No explanation had ever emerged. She had stopped looking for one. On a Tuesday morning, because it had always been Tuesdays, she opened the 6th journal to a fresh page, picked up the pen with the chewed cap, and wrote, Room 412 was a long time ago and also not that long ago at all. Nana Bia called this morning about the birds again. Josie sent a draft of the new program materials, and they're beautiful in the way her work always is. Rhett is in a meeting down the hall. I can hear him laughing at something. She paused, then she added one more line. I arrived, I meant it, I think that's the whole story. She closed the journal, tucked it into her pocket where it had always lived, and went down the hall to find her husband.